Thanks for joining, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. Good morning. I'm Catherine Coble. I'm a partner at Shoff, and we are very excited to bring you another installment of Shoff Chats. This is our opportunity just to have an interesting conversation with someone interesting that we know. And today we're going to talk a little bit about content marketing. So today I want to go ahead and get started, but before I introduce our speaker and jump into the topic, I'd like to just encourage everyone who's on the call today that we really want to hear from you as well. So if you have questions or you have an observation, you may even have a similar experience, or you may be struggling with some of the same things that others in the group are struggling with in terms of your content strategy, or anything related to marketing, advertising, public relations. Those are the kinds of things that we want to talk about. And so we definitely encourage you to be a part of that. And if you want to, you can either make a note in the chat and we can call on you, or if you want to talk through something that you're experiencing or a question that you have, I'm certainly happy to call on you and you can have the floor for a moment to go through your questions. So we'll take those opportunities as we get them. Any point in the conversation you want to do that, but we'll also make sure we reserve a little bit of time toward the end as well. So with that, let's get started with our topic today. Today, I'm very excited that we're joined by Andi Robinson. Andi's a friend of mine, someone I've known for quite a while now, and she's done some really interesting and amazing things. So I want to just give you a little bit of her background, and then we're going to jump right in. So first of all, Andi has really worked across a number of industries and organizations. She's worked in law, pharmaceuticals, insurance, and she's currently working for a very well-known brand in agriculture, and we'll talk a little more about that. Her current role is Global Content Leader for Corteva Agriscience, and she has created in this role a content operations function for the company. So we're going to talk a lot about how that came together and some best practices that she's been learning and using, and really just helping all of us understand better how content marketing can improve customer reach. She also has done some interesting things with creating or leading a global content council at Corteva, and so we can talk a little bit about how you pull others in the organization together to contribute to a content strategy. Now, that's a full-time job, and she stays pretty busy with all of that, but she also finds the time to do some interesting things outside of her work with Corteva. She has, for a number of years, consulted with various small local businesses in the Indianapolis area on their marketing needs, and she does that under the moniker of Hijinks Marketing, which I love that name, and I'm sure there's a story there. Andi has also been a speaker at Content Marketing World Conference, and she's currently writing a book about content, and so I think that that'll be a really interesting thing for us to hear a little bit more about what inspired that and what you hope to achieve with that, Andi. So welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Catherine. I'm happy to be here.
Great. Well, we'll go ahead and we'll just jump right in. You and I have already had a conversation previously and had some really interesting things that we talked about in terms of content. So, you know, we hear a lot about that topic these days, content. Everybody's talking about content. We've got to have content. And content marketing is a big area that many companies want to look at doing, and agencies are trying to figure out how to provide those kinds of services. So just to kind of level set with that, tell us a little bit about what are we really talking about when we talk about content strategy, content marketing from your perspective?
Sure. So when we typically think about marketing in general, you think about a company trying to sell you something, right? They're trying to convince you to purchase their products or services. Content marketing is more about providing value for your audience in the form of content. So you want to be creating content that people will find so valuable that they will want to share it with others. It may eventually lead to product marketing, but that's not really the main purpose of content marketing. There's really a couple of reasons that people are focusing on content marketing right now. First of all, it works. It helps create a really stronger relationship with your audience that can lead to greater sales. And secondly, there are a lot of changes affecting the online marketing world right now, from increased privacy regulations and restrictions really around the world. We don't have anything, I don't think, specific to Indiana right now, but California is certainly leading the way in that effort, GDPR with Europe. So there's a lot of areas, we actually have a map that we use to share with people internally that shows all of the privacy regulations around the world, since we are a global company, that are in consideration right now. So it's really, we're kind of losing an avenue in some ways between privacy regulations, a cookieless world. I mean, we've all heard about Google moving away from cookies and ad blockers and things like that. We're losing, some of the ability for us to better target audiences with marketing. So we really need to create content that's more authentic, more organic. And lastly, content marketing really lets us be more creative with different types of content. So things like interactive content, or infographics, calculators, those kinds of things, where traditional marketing has, kind of their standard channels, which, don't get me wrong, content marketing uses those standard channels as well. But I think we can get a little bit more creative. I would also say that content is not the same thing as content marketing. You can have content that's related to product and it not be content marketing. So those two things are different. I actually wrote a blog post about it. So that's really kind of why people are focusing on content marketing more, is that need to be more authentic, and really a desire by most companies to be more authentic. People are turning away from ads in droves. It leads us to be, a lot more influencers out there who are trying to create authentic content in collaboration with brands. Those are some of the reasons why people are really moving to content marketing as a discipline.
So you mentioned, advertising losing its luster, and I think we all can see that. And even though it's still a channel that clearly a lot of companies are spending money and effort with and isn't going to go away anytime soon, it is a changing dynamic. Do you think that more companies, more organizations should be moving away from product marketing and more into content marketing? Or what do you see as kind of the future of how those two things interact?
I think that all businesses, big, small, nonprofit, for-profit, can take advantage of content marketing, but they should make sure that it aligns with their strategy. So really, you need to start with your strategy and determine if content marketing is the right way to go. That will take some research, some more audience definition, things like that. Whether or not it replaces traditional marketing really depends on your budget and your goals. So content marketing can really work alongside your traditional marketing, as a certain part of the customer funnel. But the mix really needs to be determined by your strategy. Content marketing might be something that's extremely valuable for your marketing efforts, and you want to shift a larger portion of your budget to content marketing development, but it needs to fit in with your strategy. So, much like anything else in marketing, don't do it just for the sake of doing it, because it's people are talking about it and you think that it's new and fresh or whatever. It really needs to align to your strategy. But I think it can provide a level of relationship building that you typically don't get with product marketing. So if relationship building, education, brand awareness, if those are on your goals, definitely take a look at content marketing and how that can fit in with your product marketing mix.
Can you talk us through maybe a specific example of an actual piece of content maybe that your team has produced, and what you saw as the value of that and how that is really a different way of thinking about the relationship with the customer compared to just, traditional product marketing where you're saying, here's my product, here are the features and benefits of my product, and here's what you can do to get my product. Clearly, that's not really what you're focused on with content marketing. So tell us about a particular piece so we can really visualize that.
Yeah, so here in the US, if you follow Corteva on Twitter or Facebook, you will start to see us talk more about the topic of soil health. And really that is leading up to a particular product launch that we have coming in the next couple of months. And the reason that we started creating content that's specific to soil health and not really talking about the product itself is because a lot of people don't understand, even some farmers in some areas of the world don't understand the importance of soil and how it can kind of make or break your farming operations. And the content that we developed for that campaign is a mix because it is a global campaign. So US is one of the first countries to share the content, but it's also being shared out of countries in Asia Pacific and Latin America, Canada, several others. But Australia is another big one that's going right now. But people, the content focuses on biodiversity of soil and the soil health cycle, the importance of, keeping your soil healthy for generations to come, those types of things where we're really trying to educate our audience on the importance of soil health. And then we start to layer in some of those more product messaging elements when we talk about nematodes and the effect of products on nematodes and things like that. So nematodes are little bugs in the soil. We want to make sure that, people understand that, we keep the good nematodes and kill the bad nematodes, all of that kind of stuff. So really that's the one big one that we launched earlier this year. We created articles, we created social media posts, carousel posts, infographics, videos, all kinds of things around that topic so that our regions could pick and choose what was best for their particular audience and their particular go-to-market strategy. So it was really about education, informing them about various topics, building that relationship as a thought leadership or as a thought leader in this area. So, when people think about soil health, we want them to think about Corteva. And then that local or that connection to the products is made at the local level, at least in our case, from a global perspective.
That's great. So you guys heard it here first, nematodes.
Nematodes.
That is the thing that when you go home tonight, you can tell your family, I learned something new today, and that was what it was. So
I started with what was Dow Agrisciences, and we through mergers and splits, we're now Corteva Agriscience. I started around 8 years ago. I knew nothing about agriculture, and now I can talk to you about all kinds of bugs and crops and weeds.
That is great. I love it. So one of the things that you mentioned, I want to kind of expand on a little bit. You mentioned in terms of content, developing, visuals, graphics, maybe blogs, thought leadership pieces, things like that. There's content can take a number of forms. And so talk to us a little bit about what that means in terms of a skill set when you're trying to actually build a team for content. What should we be thinking about? What should we be looking for? What's been your experience in building a team like that?
So I think that there are some skills that are transferable between traditional and content marketing. The biggest difference is likely on the strategy side. I found that product marketers or people in more traditional commercial roles don't always make the best strategists for content marketing. It can be tough for them to not think in terms of product benefits. That is their nature. They think about product benefits. They wake up thinking about products. They go to bed thinking about products. For content marketing, you really need a person leading strategy who understands what the audience needs above and beyond your products. So it's almost in a way you think about the needs of the customer before you think about the needs of the company and selling our products. So the other area where skill sets might be a little different is when you think about content types. Again, product marketing usually follows the same type of formats, but content marketing really affords you the ability to play a little bit more with some non-traditional formats. And that's one of the things that I actually love about content marketing. When people scroll on social media, they see the same stuff, or on websites they see the same stuff. But if you show them something that is unexpected, maybe, like I said, interactive or infographics, or there's any number of different content types out there, it makes them stop a little bit. It makes them pause to see, because it's a little bit different than what they expected. So really the areas of strategy and in some ways creative development or creative design need to be a little bit different skill set than your traditional product marketing strategy and creative team.
That's great. That's really helpful. Jacqueline asks a question related to the messenger.
I know, Jacqueline.
So her question, she says, can you speak to the importance of the messenger with content marketing? I assume the environment shaping content resonates more with individuals when coming from a trusted third party, influencers, advocacy organizations, and the like, versus a corporation. Do you have any recommendations on some sort of maybe a blended approach?
Yeah, that's definitely true. And we are starting to do more with influencers, particularly in the US and particularly in the area of social media. I 100% agree, Jacqueline, that, people, we know this through surveys and studies that people trust their friends and family more than they trust brands. And so that includes, to a lesser extent, influencers. And I think there is an approach. The other thing or a blended approach where you can push some of the content out, through your own channels, whether that be your website or your social media accounts that are branded, because brand awareness is a big part of content marketing, at least in many cases, even if it's not product brand. Your company brand, right? You're trying to showcase to people that you are a leader in whatever topic you're talking about. I would also say use your employees, use what you have. So in our case, we've got a lot of scientists that work for us, and they have interesting stories to tell about how they discovered a molecule, or, how they do their work. And so that's something that we're starting to weave in a little bit more, is interviews with those folks and, quotes from our scientists to really give a personal touch to the content that we're putting out, in addition to kind of just the branded content that we push out there.
Great. You all have a number of channels and a number of streams when it comes to content distribution. Talk a little bit about when you first started in this role, where you were at and what exactly you built, because you were telling me about just the number, like literally more than 100 channels and accounts and things like that. And that seems almost crazy in terms of, trying to manage and understanding how you've segmented your audience. So talk a little bit about how you got to where you are today and the value of doing it in the way that you're doing it.
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned earlier, Corteva is the combination of the DuPont crop protection business, Pioneer Seeds, which was owned by DuPont, and the Dow Agrisciences business, which was a subsidiary of Dow Chemical. So Dow and DuPont merged, and then we split apart. So this has been like a 5-year journey. I think December of 2015 is when the merger was announced. And in none of the previous organizations did we have a content leader role. So my role was created as part of the merger and spin into Corteva. And Catherine said, I think we built 87 websites in 18 months. When we first embarked on building new websites, we didn't even have a brand name. We didn't know what the name of the company was going to be. We didn't know that blue was going to be our color. We didn't have any of that. So we were working with wireframes in black, red, and white. So it was an interesting time. And then as soon as they announced the brand name, we had to scramble and kind of, reskin everything in order to get our sites built. We have more than 150 social media accounts all over the world. So yes, we have a lot of channels. Our situation is maybe a little bit unique because our go-to-market strategies, our product strategies, everything is pretty much done at the country level because we are a regulated business. So our mantra is, decisions are made as close to the customer as possible. And so, the local teams need to determine what the best channel mix is, what their best go-to-market strategy is, whether Instagram is good for their country or Twitter or both, those kinds of things. So we really, leave that part of it up to the regions, and at the global level, we consult. When I started kind of creating this content operations function, there were a number of things I knew we wanted to put into place, such as a content philosophy. So what do we want our content to do, right? How do we want it to make people feel? The Content Council, which Catherine mentioned earlier, is a cross-functional, cross-regional team of leaders across the organization. It's around 40 people. And we meet monthly to talk about various topics related to content best practices and content marketing. So remember I said content and content marketing are two different things. So we work along both tracks. And then those council members are responsible for kind of spreading the message at the local level with their teams. We have guest speakers who come in. We've got Chris Penn from Trust Insights coming in. We've had Amy Gilliatt from Killer Visual Strategies come in. So really some outside in thinking, trying to get, people to think outside of the box a little bit. And then, there's getting leadership buy-in and getting all of the tools in place. We have a content management system, or a digital asset management system that we use across the organization to manage our media. We use a tool called Welcome, used to be called NewsCred, for content marketing planning. We use that across the organization. So really all of that had to be done in the last few years. So we joke and say we've been building the plane while we've been flying it, because that's true. We've been trying to continue to do business while building several functions within our organization, and the content operations is the one that I'm kind of in charge of. So
great. So that sounds a little daunting. And of course, for an organization such as yours, it really does make sense. And you do have a really nice, broad global team to really think about those more segmented groups by geography. I want to turn now to something that Alex Mattingly asks or mentions. And then and this is really more focused on the direction for content, but then I want to go back also and talk a little bit more about distribution in channels as well. So Alex says, it sounds like good content marketing requires a large time investment upfront for understanding your audience, researching the topic, producing a relevant piece. Then there's the time it takes to build that trust and relationship with an audience, learning that it can trust your perspective. Given all of that, what would you say to convince someone that the long-term payoff is worth that investment of time? I think this is a really good question, because as marketers, we are constantly asked to prove the value that we're bringing. And if it's not immediate or it's not directly related to a sales bump, sometimes it's hard to make that sell. What kind of advice do you have there, Andi?
Yeah, that's a good question, and something that we've been doing over the last couple of years to get people to buy into this idea of content marketing. Because in agriculture, it's not content marketing hasn't really been a huge focus. But what's ironic is that one of the earliest examples of content marketing actually comes from agriculture. So if anyone's familiar with John Deere, in I think it's 1890 something, they started a publication called The Furrow. And it didn't talk about their product specifically. It was more about agriculture and farming and things like that. And they still, to this day, the Furrow is a big lead generation for them, or lead generator for them. It's gone digital, obviously. It's not in print anymore. So we use that as an example internally, just because it's very closely related to what we do. But there are a lot of, I think, statistics out there and examples that you can show that show that return on investment. I would also say you can start small. Yes, to do content marketing right, I think you need, kind of your big strategy and that really that deep audience insight. And it can take a long time because you are trying to build relationships. But you can start small, start with maybe one topic and a couple of pieces of content and see what kind of results you get on that, versus your other type of product marketing messaging. And then you can adjust from there. I think one of the things that marketers tend to forget when doing content marketing is that you have to create goals and that can be measured and then actually measure them. That end stage of actually measuring your goals can be easily forgotten. Just because you're doing content marketing instead of traditional marketing doesn't mean that you can eliminate analytics from your plan. This also includes A/B testing and adjusting when things aren't working quite well or quite the way you expected them to. So being flexible and agile a little bit can help as well. But, start small, show your leaders or the people that you're trying to convince some of the statistics that are out there about content marketing. And then, make sure you're measuring to show those results.
Clearly, focusing on a particular topic or an area that your company really does know a lot about and really makes sense and is valuable to the customer is helpful. From a distribution perspective, in thinking about starting small, what would be your recommendation for how to build an audience for the content that you're producing? It's not, is it if you build it, they will come, or do you look to those outside influencers to try to build that audience, or what would be your recommendation in thinking about that?
I think you need to start with the audience that you are trying to target and figure out what their needs are. You can do this in a number of ways. You can do, direct research, go to the people, ask them what they're looking for. And, depending on if you're a brick and mortar or if you're online products, services, this can be done in a number of different ways. I think the, kind of build it and they will come is almost a secondary benefit of content marketing. I talked earlier about creating content that people will want to share. I say that you can show one person a product advertisement, right? They're not likely to share it with other people. But if you put something in front of them that's a unique piece of content that really resonates with them, that provides value to their life, they're more likely to share it with other people. So you're creating advocates, you're creating that secondary audience that is more likely to take a look at your products and services if that message resonates with them as well. So, there is, I think you can build that secondary audience through content marketing. But when you're thinking about your primary audience, definitely you need to start with your target audience in mind.
Very helpful. So can you talk a little bit about some of the tools? You mentioned some of the actual programs and software and things like that that you have used. And I'm wondering if, kind of even backing up from that, from a little bit more of a getting started perspective, there are a million things out there. How would you recommend someone get started? Like, is there one particular tool that they should start with, and or resources that are more educational resources, if there are even associations or organizations out there that could be helpful in educating people about content marketing and strategy going forward?
Yeah, sure. Definitely recommend Content Marketing Institute. So I think their website is contentmarketinginstitute.com. And they have all of their social media accounts out there as well. Sign up for their newsletter. They send out a blog post every day, and it's great content. Their website is very easily searchable. They have templates out there. They have a getting started guide on, if you look under resources on their website. So they have a content marketing chat every Tuesday at noon that you can join, and they have different topics. So definitely recommend them. And obviously I'm Content Marketing World Speaker, which is put on by Content Marketing Institute. So I definitely like their content. I also like the content that comes out of Divi. It's Divvy. They're actually a platform, but they produce a lot of great content around content marketing. I sign up for their newsletter. You can get it every day. You can get a roundup at the end of the week, however you choose to get that. Another source I suggest taking a look at for kind of inspiration is called Answer the Public. You can type in a topic, and this is free. It will give you questions related to that topic that people might be asking around that topic that you can answer with your content. So it's kind of an idea starter. Convince and Convert, who is owned by Jay Baer, who's an Indiana native, is another good one. Any books by Ann Handley, Joe Paluzzi, Andrew Davis. There are kind of too many to count. Maybe I should do a blog post on that. If you have access to LinkedIn Learning, they have a ton of resources related to content and content marketing that are really good. And then obviously, as Catherine mentioned, I'm writing a book. So in the spring, I will be publishing a book on content marketing, and really not just content marketing, but how the fact that our audience is human, and the kind of the psychology of how they react to content is a big part of that, of the book as well. So you can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and I'm sure I will be sharing lots of information leading up to the launch of that book.
That's great. Thanks, Andi. Okay, so I want to just take a quick pause here and remind everyone, if you have a question, if you want to share, maybe you've had a similar experience, or you're having a particular struggle that you'd love for Andi or others to weigh in on, please do share those. We really want this to be a conversation and be helpful and have a lot of value for everyone in attendance. So please feel free to share those. In the meantime, while we wait to see if anyone has any questions, another question that I had, Andi, was you mentioned a lot of great resources for learning about how to go about what you're doing. Let's say someone's at the beginning of their journey and they're getting comfortable with the idea of developing content for their organization. There are tools out there. You've shared with me, for example, there are tools to help you with the actual distribution of your content. And then there are tools out there that are helpful in planning your content. And, I'm sure a number of other types of tools. For a fairly small organization, let's say, that has a lot of really great content ideas and isn't struggling with developing content, but maybe it's more the distribution or just being organized in the operations of their content, what would be the kinds of tools? You don't necessarily have to share a specific tool, but you can if you want. But what kinds of tools should they consider first? And then, of course, as they get more sophisticated, might want to add to that toolbox.
Yeah, that's a good question. There are a lot of tools out there. There's a chart, a MarTech chart, that kind of is mind numbing, that shows the number of platforms that are out there. So it can be hard to figure out where to start. I would say, determine what your needs are, and depending on the size of your team, will also help you determine which systems to use. You're going to want something that can help you with planning. So, there's a ton out there: Asana, Trello. Like I said, we use Welcome, but there are a lot of kind of planning type tools. Many of them will have workflow management. So if that's important to you and you have a big enough team, or maybe you have outside experts who need to weigh in on content, it might be good to have something that's got that workflow sign off and approval capabilities. Something that can house your media, whether that be the same system that you're using for your planning or a separate system. Another question to ask is, do your systems need to be integrated? That can be a big chore. So if you're a smaller company, you may want to choose something that has multiple capabilities, such as like a HubSpot, or something like that, where you can do a lot of that workflow approval, planning, and distribution all in one. And so, it depends on the size of your organization, but that's what I would say. Also, some type of, measurement platform. So depending on what channels you are going to use, whether that be your website or, social media, you're going to want something that can bring all of that data together to really tell the big story of the content that you're putting out at a campaign level. Google has a ton of free resources as well, for SEO research, their keyword research tool, ad builders. They have marketing resource like a marketing academy. So lots of information there, and most of it is free. Google Analytics and all of that you can connect to your website. If you're a company who doesn't have internal marketing support, I of course suggest partnering with an agency who has the capability to do some of these things, and perhaps has some of these tools in-house that they utilize, that you would be able to use as well. So just depends on the size of the organization. Obviously, our organization is regulated, or our industry is regulated. So we have a lot of legal and regulatory sign-offs that need to happen. So you want to make sure you have everybody in the mix and in these tools to make sure that you are not missing anything along your planning process.
That's great. I want to go back to an idea that Jacqueline mentioned just in a follow-up. She said she was going to be connecting with you about how to better empower the employee base to share. And I think that's a great point, especially in a larger organization, but really an organization of any size. Sometimes your best advocates are, in fact, your employees. So have you all at Corteva spent time thinking about a strategy for engaging employees, and who and when and how, and just give us a little bit of background on your thinking in that area?
Yeah, we actually have someone who's an employee advocate leader on our corporate team. So I'm in our commercial function, but on our corporate team. So I work with her a little bit. And so she has used several tools in the past, like I think it's Linkfluence through LinkedIn, which is going away. So we're looking at a different tool, but she has a whole kind of strategy that she's put together around employees sharing content. And it's funny, sometimes employees, if you don't tell them explicitly that you want them to share, they think that they can't. Sometimes people are very reluctant to share information about their company on their own personal accounts. LinkedIn probably is an exception, but they're not going to share stuff on Facebook or Twitter, maybe, unless you kind of give them permission and give them the right type of content. And I think that's where content marketing provides another level of flexibility. A lot of times employees don't want to promote products, right? They don't want to seem like they're being salesy with their friends and family members. But if you give them content that's interesting, that's on a topic instead of a product that, you know, their friends and family might find valuable, they're more likely to share that content. There are also, like I mentioned, tools out there that are focused on employee advocacy. So, you know, you can actually put your employees' information in the tool and you can share out the content that you want them to share, give them sample post text, etc. So I think you definitely use your employees. You know, like I mentioned earlier, one of the goals is to put a human face on our companies, and I think you can do that through content marketing and other, you know, other types of marketing as well. But content marketing is an area that people are more likely to share.
That's great. That's really helpful. Have you seen examples of where it's really a content marketing fail?
That's a good question. One I hadn't thought of. You know, there's a lot of organizations that are, you know, really putting more focus on content marketing. When you think about Dove's, you know, My Beauty campaign, or some of these other organizations, you know, lifestyle companies and, you know, outdoor companies that are focusing on the great outdoors and things like that, rather than specifically focusing on their products. I don't know that I'd have to think about it as far as a fail. It's hard to tell when I think someone is going for content marketing and doesn't make it quite there because it's meant to be natural and organic. So, you know, if they fail, it's hard to tell.
Right. And I guess really the way I'm thinking of it is that a fail probably is where you think you're doing content marketing, but you're actually just doing product marketing, maybe disguised in, you know, wrapped in something that isn't really truly the point. Because back to what you said, the whole idea is that you're providing this extra value to people that's educating or inspiring or helpful in a way that's different than just, here's my product, go buy it.
Yep. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Yeah, and that's where those skill sets come into place, and you really want the right people who have that that content marketing mindset and understanding where you can bring in that product messaging. Like I said, for us, it's at the local level because it makes more sense. Our products are very local at the country, you know, at the country level. But for, you know, a smaller business, how do you make that transition? Because the two can work together. But how do you make that transition not only from a design perspective, so from a brand awareness angle, you want to make sure that your content marketing and your product marketing aren't too far off. Otherwise, people aren't going to recognize that it comes from the same organization, right? So that could definitely be a fail. You do something around content marketing, you get super creative, but it has no design connection to your company or your product, you know, your product design. So that could definitely be an area where people can fall down a little bit. And, you know, so making that connection, I think from a brand awareness perspective is key, but really understanding at what point during your content marketing campaign is it okay to bring in those product messages? You know, if you have a piece of content and then you have a CTA that maybe leads to a product page, where does that make sense?
Right, and making that smooth transition.
Yep.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the mix of content types and what you've seen be maybe more effective than others. Clearly, there's, you know, written content, might be some sort of thought leadership blog, something like that. There are graphics, video, some sort of maybe a tool and interactive, like you mentioned, calculators, things like that. What do you think is something people should keep in mind when it comes to the mix of those things? And, you know, everyone's always talking about video. We all love video. We all love images too. What do you think how can people be really effective with that? And what should that mix look like?
Yeah, so it depends on your audience and where they get their content, and how they like to receive the content. And this is a little bit where this idea of the psychological reaction to content comes into play. And so it will often take a little bit of test and learn, particularly for maybe a smaller organization that doesn't have a lot of bandwidth or resources to do a lot of research up front. Do a little bit of testing. So as part of our soil health campaign, we created a 45-second video and a 15-second video. So, maybe, put those out organically or paid. Either way, do it the same way for both pieces. So have a level playing field and see which one gets the most, the most engagement or the most interaction. I would say don't go too crazy with the mix of content types, because then people just get confused. So you want to focus on a few that you think are going to provide the most impact. The testing also applies to blog posts. Your audience may be technical in nature and they will read 1,000-word blog post, or they may not be. And, they stop reading at word 200, right? So do a little bit of testing. If you don't have the ability to do that research up front, it's fairly easy to do with tools like HubSpot or some of their competitors. You can do that A/B testing, directly through the platform, where they post 2 versions of a blog post, or send out 2 versions of a newsletter that have, that you're testing certain elements of, and then, they'll provide the results of that. So, just make sure that you're testing that, and that you have, whatever content is performing the best for you, put a little bit more focus on other pieces of content that are that same content type. So if a 200-word blog post is working better than a 500-word blog post, focus on making your blog posts a little bit shorter. So, you can, and sometimes you don't have the resources to do some of these things, like maybe video, depending on how crazy you want to go with it, can be resource intensive. Interactive content. We actually have a platform that we use to create interactive content for our websites, called Ceros, CEROS. And you basically create, it's like Adobe Creative Cloud. So graphic designers use it in our organization, and then it just spits out an embeddable code that you put on your website, and it renders right on your website. But you can create pop-ups and things flying across the screen and all kinds of stuff, whatever you want. So, make sure that you're focused on the things that your audience is going to want.
What about cadence? When you're first starting out, it can feel a little overwhelming that I have to develop content, constantly. And talk a little bit about what you think is the right cadence for getting started. Obviously, that'll depend on the business and the content itself. But if you any thoughts you have related to that, in terms of just overall timing and flow.
Yeah, so it depends on your content types, your distribution channels. So if you're focused on web, if you have, depending on the social channel you're using, whether it's Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, those all have kind of different cadences. I would say Twitter is probably the one you need to feed the most, and put the most content in, because it's really fast paced. The others you could probably do, 2 or 3 times a week. And so, it depends on what your audience will react to. It also depends on if you're doing paid or organic. So if related to social, if you're doing paid, that can be interspersed with organic content. And then, lastly, I would say that I lost my train of thought. Sorry, my dog is wanting to go out. He's sitting here. So I would make sure that, you are putting that mix together in a way that makes sense for your audience.
Great, that's helpful. Well, we won't keep your dog too much longer. We are getting close to the end of our time. So I do want to just encourage, if anyone does have another observation, question, comment that they want to throw into the mix, speak now or forever hold your peace, and just let us know. But as we kind of wrap up, Andi, are there any other thoughts that you have for those who, let's say maybe they've been doing content and they're feeling pretty confident about it, but maybe they want to take it to the next level in terms of, what are the trends, or what do you see as kind of the next direction for great content development and great content marketing for the future?
I think it's building these, the deeper relationships is going to be the focus. We are all bombarded by messages. The statistics are just crazy about how many messages we get on any given day and any given hour. And so, there's a statistic that we cite internally that something like 83 or 89% of millennials, so particularly with the younger generation, will do business with a company that aligns to their values, whose values align to their values, over a company whose values don't align to their values. So I think that's going to be increasingly important for organizations, particularly, like I said, if they're targeting a younger audience. There tends to be a stronger connection with organizations who, think the way that they think, are bold in their values, put those values out front and center, even put content marketing efforts behind their advertising their values, right? So don't just say that your company did 200 hours of, community service in the last year or whatever. Show it, show people, show your values through that connection to your products. Are your products, do they align to your messaging? So those kinds of things I think will be increasingly important as we get further into, the next few years.
Great, thank you. So Jacqueline just asked one last question. You already did mention a number of resources, but if we had to boil that down to maybe one or two top websites or other sources of information to stay on top of trends, what would you recommend?
Yeah, definitely Content Marketing Institute would be number one on my list. And then probably for content marketing specifically, I would say Divi would be my number two.
Great. Okay. Well, just so that you all know, we will actually do a recap summary blog, and we'll have some links to some of the resources that Andi has mentioned today. So we'll get that out as soon as we can, along with a link to the replay of today's session. So if you'd like to go back and revisit it, or if you think that someone else on your team could get some real value out of it, you can certainly share that with them. So if you got an email from us registering for this event, you will get a follow-up with that information. But it'll also be posted on the Shoff website and through the Shoff social channels as well. So
if I would add one more thing, and if you follow me on Twitter, you've probably seen this, but if you're interested in attending Content Marketing World, it's at the end of September. I'm doing a session on getting buy-in for a company-wide digital asset management platform. So how to kind of corral your content. And they have a virtual option. So if you don't think you can attend in person, they have a virtual option. And if you want $100 off, you can use my code Robinson100 and you get $100 off.
Thanks, Andi. Gosh, $100.
I'm providing value.
That's so great. We really appreciate that. Well, thank you so much. I definitely encourage everyone to follow Andi, look for her book next year, and check out the Content Marketing Institute, Content Marketing World Conference. All of those things are going to be great resources. We know that content is going to be something we're going to continue to be talking about, and what it looks like today is probably not even what it'll look like just a year from now or 5 years from now. So it'll be really interesting to see how things evolve and progress in the future. So we'll go ahead and let everyone go. Thank you again for attending today. We will have another Shoff chat in September. We're finalizing our details now. on the content and the date. So look for that information to come soon. And as always, we would love to hear any ideas that you have. If you have an idea for a great speaker, a topic that we should address, we welcome all of those ideas. You can get back in touch with me or check out any of our Shoff social channels to reach out to us. We always appreciate those ideas. And we want to continue to bring all of you value as marketers, advertisers, public relations professionals, and leaders in your companies. So thank you so much. Thanks, Andi. Everyone have a great day and enjoy creating great content.